Hi there, I am Thomas and welcome to Prussian Czar. In today's episode we will not only have a look at the cavalry belts and buckles of World War I, but also produce one. So let us first have a glimpse into the contents of this video. Nothing new here. After the introduction, we are about to have a quick look about how they looked in comparison to the infantry ones. And we talk a little bit about their story and their history. In the next part, we will produce one according to all the measurements and descriptions we find in the sources and originals. And in the last part, there will be a conclusion. So, no surprises here. Let's get right in there. Well, this is not complicated at all. The length of the belt depends unsurprisingly on the size of the wearer's body. The width of the belt was about 4.5 cm. On the black side of the belt there was a smaller strap attached, with a length of 20 cm. So it was able to adjust the buckle in the right length. Until September of 1915, the belt was given out in a natural color by the army, but had to be dyed brown, as soon as it got too much of a used look. From September 1915 on, it had to be dyed black. The buckle is pretty different from the infantry. As we can see, the cavalry one is open at the front. It just has a pretty simple shape of a rectangle, with no further specific signs. Since I got here an original one, it is a bit dull and not that shiny. In contrast to that, the infantry one is closed at the front and has a specific sign. Well, it is a box lock to be precise. The sign depends on the state of origin of the regiment. Here I got a Prussian one. In this sketch we see several different ones, like a Bavarian, a Saxonian, a Hessian and so on. When war broke out, they first were shiny in brass, then made dull, and later on they were painted in field grey. From September 1915 on, the belts were unified and every weapon of arm the same was given out, which was the box lock of the infantry. Painted in field grey. Now, who was allowed to wear them apart from the troopers of the cavalry? Well, basically everyone who was equipped with a sword. So you find them on drivers, artillerists, airship crew troopers, soldiers of the train, different NCOs, and some more. Now we have all the parts we need: a leather strap, the die, and the buckle. So let's start to produce one. First, I started to get the right width for the belt. So I had to cut away around 5 mm of the strap. For that, I used a normal belt cutter with a proper measurement. I took the strap and dragged it through the cutter until the whole belt had the width I needed. After having the proper width, the dyeing had to be set up. In order to do this, the leather had to be cleaned and prepared for the dye. It was time to use the dye preparation, which was first applied to the sponge. The rough part of the sponge was used, first of all to roughen up the leather just slightly on a micro level, so the dye could be better applied to the leather. Thereafter, it was time to dye the belt in a lighter brown. The color was saddle tan to be precise. A wool dauber was used for even applying of the dye on the leather. 2 thin layers of the dye were used to get a smooth color. Then it had to dry for a bit. In the next step, the belt and the used parts had to be cut in the right length and shapes. So it was time to cut the edges rounder, as well as getting the strap for the backside into the right shape. As the shape was done, The leather for the backstrap had to be thinned out, just to be more flexible. It did not take long. After all the pieces had the right shapes and the backstrap the right thickness, it was time to work on the edges of the leather. This means that the edges had to be cut back a little bit, so they would become a bit rounder and softer. It was also a preparation for polishing the edges. Afterwards, I worked on the edges of the belt to make them smoother. A remedy was applied to give the edges a great finish. After applying the remedy, the edges were polished to get them as smooth as possible. As soon as the edges were all polished, holes had to be punched into the backstrap. The position of the holes were marked and then punched into the leather piece by piece. Following this, the edges of the backstrap had to be polished too. The edges here were polished the same way as before at the belt. Then it was time to punch a hole in the belt for the hook. So I looked for the right position. And yes, the hook fit perfectly into the hole. My next task was to thin out the end of the belt. My goal here was to get a smoother transition. In order to prepare the sewing, I pre-stitched the holes with my antique leather sewing machine, which worked fine. The sewing itself was done by hand, with a waxed and thread, an awl, needles and a pair of tongs. I started to sew the flap for the hook. One hole widened with the awl, then the needles and the thread had to be put through it. As they were through the hole, the threads were pulled a bit to get a strong hold of the parts.
When I got this done, the strap on the back for the buckle was sewed on the belt exactly the same way as before. My last step was to impregnate and seal the surface with a finish and to let it dry. Again, a wool dauber was used to get an even surface. Now let's have a look at it in the reveal and a quick chat in the conclusion. This is indeed more of a great reveal than a conclusion. The belt looks good so far and the techniques I used worked out. Well, it sure has its imperfections, but my skills developed. Now it needs to prove itself on duty. Thank you all for watching, have a good one, and see you next time. And now, let's just enjoy the outcome of the belt.